Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Academia Podcast. My name is Todd, and I'm the host of the show from the Warp Zone Studios, deep in the heart of central Minnesota. I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently today, and I'm not sure exactly why, but I feel like I just needed to flush the entire format of what I had planned for the day, and we'll see exactly where that takes us, and to be a little less formal than I normally am. So basically, I think what led to this was I was going to be doing a lot of show prep yesterday, and I felt like instead of doing that and preparing for the show and recording the show, I essentially took that time and went and played outside with my kids with their new snow gear, and we just made snow forts and we played for quite a while, and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing. I know in times past I've talked about the multiple intelligences with Howard Gardner, and I know one of my son, Titus, one of his greatest intelligences, whether it be just in who he is or the age that he's at, but he's full of just energy all the time. And going outside is one of the things that he does to connect well with the world around him. It's where the synapses are firing, where the connections are being made. It's where the brain activity is. And I know on this show we talk a lot about schooling and education. And if I could put that lesson that I had yesterday, let's be honest though, I play with my kids a lot. They're, the largest priority in my life, next to God. And with that being said, when you're a teacher and you feel the need to change something, whether it's just something coming from the deep recesses of who you are, or if it's the Holy Spirit himself telling you to make a change and whispering in your ear saying, do this thing. You know that once that voice comes upon you to go a certain direction, that if you stick with the agenda and you stick with the program and you ignore that, it doesn't feel very good. And it feels like you are swimming against the stream, swimming against the current, if you will. And that's kind of a gist of what happened to me yesterday, but I felt like it was a good learning experience for me and something that I could continue to impart upon my listeners of this show, is that changes sometimes need to be made. And sometimes they happen during the middle of the plan, during the middle of the action, during the middle of the execution. You have to change impromptu. And when that happens, are you ready for it? Are you ready to make a change if necessary? And, maybe it's just a change for me today, that I just need to get in front of a microphone and talk, see what comes out, or maybe it's the trajectory of this show, or maybe it's the trajectory of something else going on in life. Maybe it's something that, I guess, going on in your life, that some type of change needs to be made, and you're not quite certain what it is, or maybe you fully know what I'm talking about, and this is a source of confirmation over something that's already been spoken in your heart, that you're wondering if there's more out there. And in an area and you're wondering if the risky side is going to be worth it and pay out its benefits compared to staying put. Well, I can't speak on every single area of life and everything that you might be going through, but I do know that taking a risk is how faith begins and how stepping out in faith happens. So, just having some coffee this morning, but I wanted to continue that thought for a second. When I moved to Alaska the first time in 2011, can't believe it's already been 10 years, it was risky for me. I had a lot of friends in the central Minnesota area, and I had family here, and I had other opportunities open up. So Alaska wasn't the only thing happening. I had another opportunity lined up for me to do youth ministry there. And through about a week of just getting outside in the actual nature and listening to God, because for me that's how God speaks to me. I have not always been an outdoorsy person. That doesn't mean that I don't like it outside. I'm not that pale fellow in Benchwarmers that as soon as he sees the light, he screams, "Oh no!" The sun, that dreaded sun. No, but I enjoy going outside, but I don't live outside. I'm not one of those junkies that you see that's driving around in a Subaru Outback with a kayak on his roof everywhere he goes, and has a North Face jacket on and a Dakine backpack with one of those straws that goes to your mouth, and with the yellow goggles that is constantly climbing mountains everywhere he goes. I don't understand how people can do that, and they're always constantly climbing mountains. I wonder if they have a job to go to. That isn't me. I mean, I'd love to do more things like that. I've always wondered that too, though, is that there's certain people that seem to be constantly traveling. And when I was in college, that was certainly things that I would see. There was maybe a good handful of people that are always in Asia or Europe. And it's like the traveling never stopped. And I really was just tempted to ask these people, what is it that you do? I mean, are you like a trust fund baby and your parents are just saying, go have fun? Or is this part of your job? Is this part of a college program? Whatever. But that's getting back to it. Nature is a huge area of how I hear the Lord speak to me, how I hear God speak to me. And I mean, if you're tuning into this podcast the first time, basically every episode I have references, my Christian faith. I will be referencing a liberty education, and just with my personal experiences with public schooling, and just an overall emphasis on school choice, with that most centered around homeschooling. And so I will be talking about my faith on every episode. That's just something I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to be doing it with my homeschool curriculum with my kids, and I'm not going to create a filter where I'm not talking about it, especially on my podcast. Because ultimately, this show is not about you as the listener. It's about me, and it's my show. And if you tuned in and you like hearing what you're listening to, then go ahead and subscribe and keep listening. But if it's not your cup of tea, there are thousands of other podcasts out there. But this is my show, and this is something that the Lord has told me to do, as He's seen it grow in my hand. And as I saw during the priming stages of last year, of Him develop something more and more in my life, this was something that I felt like He proverbially placed in my hands on the 6th day, when the rest of Americans are only working a 5-day work week. Although Scripture says that we rest on the seventh day, I believe that the sixth day is something that we can do for God to bless. He's called us to be the head and not the tail, and to just see if we put something in His hands, is He going to be fruitful with it? To which I believe, yes, He will be. Watch that thing grow. And I could get on that rabbit trail. Maybe I will. But I wanted to continue my thought of, when I was taking the risk of going to Alaska, is that this was during a week where I was an intern at a fairly sized church. It wasn't a mega church, but it was a pretty big church, right? And this was during a spring conference. It was a really big conference. There were speakers all week, and I was to work at this thing as an intern. And for some reason, I just saw the spirit of religion everywhere, and it quite frankly disgusted me. And I just felt this plasticity in the area, in the air of guiding people's conversations, of an image that people were trying to project. And this was also during a week where I had to make a big decision if I'm going to move to Alaska to help a friend with the ministry that he was doing on this island in southeast Alaska. Now, I had already been there for a whole week earlier that year for a mission trip in which we did some services and hanging out with teenagers and doing shows for kids and doing some local projects for the community. And I had already fallen in love with it there. I didn't think that was going to happen, but there was just something about that small community that I was in that really grasped my heart. And I think a lot of it had to do with I was starting to get out of the theory and moving more into the practice. And that's a good litmus for all of us, is that there's so much theory, but when does the rubber meet the road, that it finally becomes practice in our lives? And so during that week in which I was thinking and really praying and fasting about if I needed to go to Alaska or not, is during this conference that I was at in Minneapolis, and I just felt like I needed to leave during the middle of me working. I don't know exactly what I missed out on, but I left for maybe a good hour, maybe an hour and a half. And as I just started walking, I found this city park that had hockey rinks there, and obviously all the snow was melting. But there was a memory that came back to me, and it was of my dad and me going to a hockey practice outside in the 90s, listening to good old Stone Temple Pilots on the way there, and going to a hockey practice and having all my hockey gear in the back of a truck, driving down the city streets and going to a hockey practice in the middle of the winter. That memory had come back to me, and just spending a lot of time on the hockey rink outside. And it was a real moment where I felt some sincere nostalgia, and I felt as if the Lord is whispering to me that, if I go to Alaska, it's going to be more like this. That memory of me and my dad doing things outside, hitting that same area that feels like when nostalgia hits you. And it's going to be less like what you're seeing back at that conference. And it was probably one of the most real moments I've ever had with the Lord, confirming that I need to do this. I know I need to be about this adventure. I need to go into the wilderness and find what God wants to teach me there. And to this day, I've never regretted that. I got rid of a lot of belongings before I left. I felt it in me to just give. I had to virtually say goodbye to my friends. And when I went to Alaska, it was a day when my younger sister was having open heart surgery. So my dad unfortunately could not have been there to see me off. And so my grandma brought me out. And man, I tell you, saying goodbye to her at the airport, I remember when I was young and I'd look up to her and I'd see her with the short, dark hair of a woman in her 50s. And now I'm seeing a woman in her later 70s. And I'm looking down on her with a head full of white hair. And it really just made me wonder if I was ever going to see her again. Or see anyone else in my family ever again. I had no idea how long I was going to be in this first town that I lived in. And it really hit me that we're about to enter into the unknown. Because I don't know what this town is like past a week. I've said it on the show before that sometimes I like to move from place to place just to experience a life there during the seasons and get a routine developed there, but that's because I don't feel like I can get a full impression of a place in 1 week. And that is certainly the same thing of what happened the first time I lived in Alaska. When I moved to Angoon, Alaska the first time, everything was great. And I was on this honeymoon phase, being in this new area until about the third week of being out there. And at that point, I was having a hard time just remembering new people. And it's never been an issue with me. I was in a new culture, though. Lifestyles were differently, and I think that when I was in this new culture, I learned real quick how much my own culture has created a huge portion of my own identity. And that needed to be stripped if I was to learn more about who God has made me to be. And I could go on and on about the lessons that I learned in Alaska. I really can, and maybe I'll start doing more of that because, there was a good amount of time I spent there just listening to God. And the first year I was there, I was in the middle of a temperate rainforest in the southeast Alaska with mountains, and there was trees as far as the eye could see. And they weren't pine trees. The actual tree name escapes me, and gosh, it's gonna bother me. But maybe if I remember it during the day, I'll reference it on the next podcast. But there were just trees as far as the eye could see, and there was a large river called a strait, and that was really between the front of town and the next mountain chain, and it was just beautiful. I mean, to this day, it's probably the most beautiful place I've ever seen on the planet. That's not to take away from Kotzebue or from Buckland, which I also lived in those towns as well. They had different vibes to it, and it was a lot more rolling hills, a lot more tundra, and it kind of reminded me a little bit about Minnesota because I moved out to Kotzebue during the winter time. And as I began to see tundra for miles and miles from the town where we lived and snow covering it, for some reason I couldn't escape from my mind that they weren't cornfields underneath that snow. And until the snow melted, and just you have to get rid of a lot of things that you've added to your own experience to be able to learn from these new places and these new opportunities, these new experiences as well. But changing the topic here a little bit is that a little transparency. I do still work. I've had people ask me what I do for a living. Like, what do you do? How could someone like you possibly monetize what you're doing? And there are ways, and maybe in which I'll get to some of those someday. But for today, I do still work what I call a tent ministry. It puts food on the table. And right now I do taxes, prepare people's taxes, and it's been quite a wild ride this year, especially with the CARES Act going through last year, and just a lot of things that have happened with people during the coronavirus pandemic. And so a lot of people's tax situations have slightly altered and changed, and there's a lot of questions people that haven't received their stimulus checks, and people taking out X amount of unemployment and getting, temporarily fired from their jobs due to COVID stuff. And so it's been quite a wild ride. But during it all, it seems to me that I'm getting to a point where I just want to opt out of working for a different employer. And it doesn't really matter, I guess, where I'm working, is that I get to the place where I would rather just be my own boss. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I still believe we are called to be the head and not the tail. And if you are someone that is leading your own business, you're still answering to people. You're answering to the bank. You're answering to advertisers. You are answering to customers. So indirectly, these are people you still have to answer to. You still have to be held accountable. And to a certain extent, that if you were to mess up, it's going to directly affect you in larger ways. But one thing that I really am hungering for is just the idea where I don't need another person to micromanage my day. When I see the workload that needs to be done, I know how to assess, I know how to divide, I know how to compartmentalize, I know how to set goals, I know how to set systems behind those goals in order to get everything done with timelines. And when I have another person that needs to review those decisions that I've made, and constantly you get this feeling that someone's looking over your shoulder and then just mindlessly correcting things that just don't even need to be talked about. If you would just ignore that one thing that was going to correct itself over the course of time, because this thing was not in my blind spot. If you'd have waited 15 more minutes, this thing would have been corrected on its own. And that's just a history of the workplace environment, is that the micromanagers that feel constant need to correct you over something that you're fully already aware of. And I can't seem to escape that, is that I just always want to respond, hey, little did you know I'm already doing the thing that you're suggesting to me. Over and over and over again. I like to exceed in the workplace where I'm at. I am someone that hungers and strives for excellence and success. But when I feel the oppressive weight of a micromanager, it takes away the drive, takes away the momentum, it takes away any type of spark that I have to want to continue striving for success. It's not about being noticed for the work that you're doing. It's about the constant harping on the negative that has squandered the growth of everything that I could be doing organically that's meant to help this organization out. And I would rather just be at the point where I'm seeing less in my life, less income, less benefits, in order to see what God is truly growing when when I do place something into His hands. And for all the entrepreneurs out there that are trying to start something small, I just want to give you Galatians 6:9 today, is that do not grow weary in your well-doing. For at the proper time, God will give you a harvest if you do not give up. So everything that you have is as of a seed. It's a seed, okay? And maybe that seed right now is in the ground. And before that thing needs to grow, that seed needs to be dark. That seed needs to be alone. Seed needs to be isolated and wet and cold and through the unknown of what's going to happen before that thing can truly grow, as Jesus Himself says. That before this kernel of wheat can grow, it must die. And that's truly how we see every seed that we plant, it must die before it grows. I mean, a seed biologically is never dead. It certainly has a dormant stage of life stored up with inside of it. But, a seed needs to be forgotten about, and it needs to be placed into the ground. And let me retrace a second. I don't mean forget it in terms of forget the things that you have done to sow. But I'm also suggesting is that you need to move on with your life after you've sown a seed. Keep sowing. Keep sowing those seeds. And get to the point where you lose track over which harvest is lined up with which seeds. When your lifestyle is continually sowing, in time you will continually go through seasons of harvest. And that also happens materially as well. I mean, I've been giving clothes away for years, and I haven't seen a lot of harvest in those areas. And recently, I had a friend give me a brand new Element hooded sweatshirt. Looked like it was pretty nice. And then just last night, I had someone give me a Timberwolves jacket, brand new, tag still on it. And they said, I seen you with a Timberwolves hat on, and I thought maybe you like the Timberwolves, so I thought I'd get you this coat. I'm telling you, you will reap what you sow. Galatians 5 says God will not be mocked. I believe that's Galatians 6. Galatians 6:5, I believe. God will not be mocked. God will not be mocked, for a man that reaps will also sow. A man that sows and also reaps. Paraphrasing here, but it's absolutely true. If you sow tares, you're going to get tares in your life. If you're going to sow seeds, you're going to get fruit in your life. Harvest is always a slave to the seed that's behind it. God has asked us over the last year to sow in areas that is way larger than any year that I've ever sown. And I can't get weary in my well-doing either, because I haven't seen a harvest yet. Because in time, if we continue to remain faithful, every single harvest is going to be backed by the seed that's behind it. And that's the law of sowing and reaping. There's nothing that, there's some certain things you can do to undo your seed. I'm not going to say there's nothing you can do to stop that seed. I believe fully if you're going to speak words of cursing over that seed, then you're going to see things not happening. So continue to speak words of life over the areas that you want to see growth. Continue to speak areas of death over the things that need to die. Maybe there's certain things in your life that need to die. Maybe there's certain things that you need to depart from that's hindering your growth. I know that when there is a form of momentum in your own life that's propelling you to do something, and I call that God. When God has given you a calling to do something, and you only get so far, and then something stops you. Maybe it's an old habit or a sin pattern. Maybe it's just thinking. You get thrown into feedback loop in your mind. It says, I can't do this. It's too much. The money's not there. What are they going to say? You get into these feedback loops of, the fear of man, pleasing people, trying to do too much for people, worried about the finances of how it's all going to work out. Or maybe it's, like I said, the sin pattern or habits that you continue to wrap yourself around that's stopping your own growth. When there are certain things that stops your growth, and that's what we call a chain. They stop you, and these chains need to be broken in Jesus' name. So I want to encourage you that these things that need to be broken can't just be done with out of your own strong will. your own willpower. You're saying that I'll just make an about face, turn away from that thing. That's a start. Think differently about it. Obviously, thinking differently about it is the very first thing you need to do. But at that point on, that this thing needs to be broken through the Spirit. It can't be done by your own flesh. The flesh, is weak, Jesus said, but the Spirit is willing. So God is able to break certain things off your life if you just fully surrender to Him and give time to Him. Give time just to listen. I can't say that enough. I felt as if today was supposed to be a change, if just for one episode, where we flush the format and we just simply have some talk over a cup of coffee. Maybe just all of us need to slow down a little bit. And I believe those things are needed when you are a man of action, a woman of action. You're a pioneer. You're a trailblazer. And if that's you, there's certainly nothing wrong with zooming out just a little bit. Zooming out. Let's look at the bigger picture. What is happening right now? Where are we going? What are we doing? And then to just stop thinking about the agenda. Stop thinking about the processes. Stop thinking about the goals. And then get to the point where you're just thinking about the very thing that matters most. You could accumulate wealth. You can make a name for yourself, but ultimately this is not about making a kingdom for yourself. You are here to expand the kingdom of God, to see that His name proclaimed across the four corners of the world. And I guarantee you, if you make that your mission, you'll never go wrong. You will never go wrong. He will lift you up. Where there is a falling, He'll be your rising. I fully believe that. And there's nothing man will be able to do to stop it. That's why I've said on my show on Monday that it doesn't matter who's in office. It does not matter. He can continue to lift you up where man can try to put you down. In the book of Acts, there was people in prison that were followers of Jesus. They were miraculously broken free out of the prison. And God can do that in your life, where it seems that your entire pursuit is surrounded by oppressive people that work for the government. God can break you free. God can get you off their radar. And He will do so. He can find ways to make you succeed. He'll find ways to make you fruitful. Because the cattle on 100 hills belongs to Him. He'll make it happen. He could get you money in your hands like that. And He is on the gold standard. He's not printing away. He can do it. Just continue to have faith. Continue to believe. Get out of our mind for a little while. Allow your spirit man to be awoken to discerning what the next steps are. I mean, if I could give you any type of emphasis on what I wanted to talk to you about today, it's learning how to change mid-action step. Learning how to sidestep. I think of that app, that Subway Surfers game. You could stay in the same path, and sooner or later there's going to be a hurdle there, and you got to sidestep that to keep going. And I believe you'll get there. And I'm not sure why I'm talking so generally, but maybe I need to, because everyone faces different things. There's certain things that are in our line of sight, things that we're striving to, and there's certain things that need to be overcome. And I'm going to sit here and I'll champion you. Well, if anything that I said here today has affected you and has resounded with you, you can always correspond with me. My email is todd at warpzoneu.com, and I will be in correspondence with you. Make sure you do check out our website. We do have all of our episodes there at warpzoneu.com. There's also a banner, I believe, at the top of the academia page on our website to subscribe to our newsletter. I'll start coming out with that very soon, just to keep people in the loop with some current developments of what's happening with the show. And I'm overall excited to see where things are going to go, because when you trust the Lord and you put things in His hands, He's just going to continue to bless it. But when He's asked you to sidestep or to make a change, you do it. You do it. So maybe I need to take a little bit of a sabbatical and see where He wants the direction of the show to go. I don't think that's going to be the case right now. I believe that it's time to get to work. I'm going to continue to produce content. But I think as of for today, I felt like this needed to be addressed. And if that's you and you're that one listener out there that needed to hear some of these words of encouragement today, then I believe that what needed to be spoken has been spoken. On the Mandalorian, that little guy, I have spoken. So I hope you guys have yourself a wonderful Wednesday. If you are in central Minnesota, I encourage you to come to Hutchinson at 7 p.m. There is a revival going on at the Days Inn right now through our church at the river at MSP Church. And we have an evangelist speaker right now by the name of Sam Dent from England. And it's going to be great. It's going to be a wild ride for the next 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I mean, we've already had meetings since Monday. So if you are listening to the show, make sure that you check it out. There's really not a lot going on right now, and I believe that you can make it. There's free childcare there if you have kids, and you will not regret going. I fully attest to that. Is that there's a work that needs to be done. Sometimes it's only done through His Spirit, and yes, He can go and do that out in the middle of the woods with you, but there's something that also happens corporately as a body as well, and these have been great services. The fire of God has just been there. So if you're around central Minnesota, come check it out. And if you're not, if you're from North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, got a few days. Why don't you come on Friday night or Thursday night? Hutchinson, Minnesota at the Days Inn, 7 p.m. And we'll see what God does if you decide to come. That would be wonderful. I'll be there, and I'll introduce myself to you and my wife and kids as well. So I hope you all have yourself a wonderful Wednesday, and we will see you guys on Friday. And until then, drive safe, and God bless.